13-game losing streak has Kings fans wanting to throw their drink. Monday night, that's exactly what one of the players did.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. I am James Hammond, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Also, a host of Locked On Kings. Covered the Sacramento Kings for the last 16 years as a credentialed media member of the Pro Basketball Writers Association, podcaster, writer, been on TV, all that good stuff. You can follow me on Twitter at James_HamNBA. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day here on Locked On Kings. Locked On Kings is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is now the #1 sports podcast network. Let's get right into this thing. We got all kinds of things to cover, but before we do, this first portion of the podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with a bet on FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. All right, we're going to finish with this tanking problem that the Sacramento Kings and the NBA as a whole have. We're going to discuss whether any veteran buyouts are coming. But before we get to that, we're going to dive into the frustrations that are mounting with the Sacramento Kings. They, of course, boiled over in last night's absolute drubbing in New Orleans at the hand of the Pelicans. And if you watched enough clips today on any social media account, you've probably seen DeMar DeRozan slamming a water bottle to the ground, having water fly all over the court in New Orleans. The frustrations, especially with DeMar DeRozan, are clearly bubbling to the surface. I think a lot of Kings players feel this way. Losing doesn't feel good. 13 games in a row doesn't feel good. But I would point out that DeMar DeRozan has been a pro's pro throughout this entire season and last, for that matter. I don't always love shot selection and the isolation game of DeMar DeRozan, but that doesn't mean I don't respect him as a player and what he's meant to the league. He is a Hall of Famer, in my opinion, a 6-time All-Star, a top 25 scorer in the history of the game, and realistically, a consummate professional. What we saw last night was frustrations boiling over that have probably been building for a while. And I want to point out a couple of things here. First of all, DeRozan's played in all 55 games. And we'll get to the injury report against the Utah Jazz a little bit later in the show. But on a team where lots of guys have been hurt, and then the last couple of weeks, a lot of guys just haven't played, DeMar DeRozan shows up every single night. And again, he's about as steady as you can get as a player. The jump shot is still pure from 18 feet. He still has an ability to get to the free throw line and get any player in the league to leave their feet on a pump fake. This is again, future Hall of Fame player who in his 17th season is probably wishing he was somewhere else and wondering why in the world he's got to be on a team that currently sits at 12-43 on the season. The Kings are 31 games under 500. Is that what that is? I think that's what that is. 31 games under 500. It's absolutely ridiculous. On the season, we're looking at a player who's averaging 18.7 points, 3.8 assists, 3.2 rebounds, and 32.4 minutes per night. Again, he's played in every single Sacramento Kings game. He's showing up. He's trying to help the young players develop. He's trying to get them involved, and he's trying to actually win a basketball game. So this doesn't go down as one of the worst stretches of his career, and it probably already is. 13 games is tough. It's tough for anybody. It's especially tough when Father Time is knocking at the door, and as a player, you don't have a lot of time left in the league. And that's kind of where DeMar DeRozan is as a player. Last night, Jason Anderson from the Sacramento Bee talked to DeMar DeRozan after the game. I got a couple of quotes here I actually want to read because I think they capture some of why DeMar DeRozan is frustrated. And the interesting thing, it's not about everything as a whole. It's about the fact that they're playing a way that doesn't make sense to him, and he's frustrated by it. So this is a direct quote from DeRozan. A lot of stuff we do is self-inflicted. Us not being in the right spots, make it a chain reaction. Them getting back in transition, getting easy shots, easy buckets. So the water bottle incident was just me wanting to play the right way, win, lose, or draw. And Jason did a really good job of going and talking to Doug Christie as well after the game. Head coach for the Sacramento Kings said, I went down and sat with him for a second just to talk to him. His frustration is more about, first of all, ending a skid. And also, after being so close that it could go either way in so many games, this is the first time in a minute where we had this kind of result where we weren't really in the game. And like, look, I get that. Like last night's game was, again, you go back to the losses on Friday and Saturday where they lose to the Clippers on Friday. Close game. They lose to the Cleveland Cavaliers on Saturday, and again, extremely close. They end up losing, I think, like super close. Like the Kings aren't just cashing it in and not playing hard. They're actually going out there and trying to compete. They're just trying to compete with extremely young and inexperienced players, or maybe just really inexperienced players, since none of their young players are super young. I mean, you can go around the league and find 19 and 20 and 21-year-old players all over the place. The Kings don't have those players. Again, Neat Clifford, their rookie, turned 24 yesterday. Max Reynaud, 23. Devin Carter, 24. Dylan Cardwell, 24. Your young core of players who are first and second year players aren't like young by regular human age. They are, or by NBA age, they are inexperienced. So, and it's causing a lot of problems, and you're going to make mistakes. I would say that some of the young players are actually playing a lot harder and a lot better than a lot of the veteran players, but that doesn't still like make up for the inexperience and the errors that happen. The Kings were absolutely crushed in transition yesterday. They didn't get back. They didn't stop ball. They didn't do basic rudimentary things in transition to slow a team down. And that's why they got absolutely destroyed by a very, very bad / mediocre Pelicans team. So I get DeRozan's frustration. I do. I would continue to point to the fact that he has been a pro. He's tried to keep his composure. Losing your composure here and there is going to happen. We've actually seen it with Russell Westbrook the last few games as well, where he started to amass a bunch of technicals. And, you know, that's one way to voice your frustration. But with DeMar, I just think that this is him coming to the realization of where this season is going to head and what that means for him in year 17 of his NBA career. And again, when you're looking at, you know, the final 2-3 years maybe of your career, and you're having to maybe go out like this, it doesn't feel good. So when we come back, we're going to discuss the buyout situation, because the Kings have a group of players here like DeMar DeRozan that maybe don't want to finish the season with the team. Maybe they would feel a little bit better playing somewhere else. And we'll dive into why that's a possibility and maybe why it's not for a lot of these guys. All right. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business moving forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed sponsored jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listings to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, and location. That's what I like about Indeed. You can get specific and target exactly what you need. It saves time because you're spending less energy sorting through mismatches. And with sponsored jobs, your posts get seen by even more candidates who actually fit. And there's a stat that says it all. In a minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help you get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been simple. That's why Gametime has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs with the fans. Pull up the Gametime app, pick an upcoming NBA game, and have tickets locked within minutes. See the all-in upfront with no surprise fees at checkout's price. You can also see the view from your seat before buying and which makes the decision easy. This takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's Locked On, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not gametime.com. All right. Sacramento Kings have all kinds of issues going on right now, and I don't think it's going to get any better. That's because the Kings are going young. They are going to try to finish out this season, the final 27 games, whatever it might be, trying to develop this young core, but also not win a ton of games because they're in the same boat so many other teams around the league are. And that is, they are looking at the NBA draft lottery and praying for some sort of superstar in the draft that will change their fortunes as a franchise. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen or not. Again, as of right now, the Sacramento Kings have the worst record in the NBA. They're a game ahead of Indiana in the standings for the worst record, a couple of games ahead of a few other teams. And look, it's not going to get a lot better. And I think it's an interesting thing that's going on because the Kings actually have quite a few players that could dip out and go play somewhere else to finish this season. We've gotten past the NBA trade deadline, so they can't be traded at this point. But when you have a roster filled with either, expiring contracts or contracts that are like 1-year deals, that does lend itself to the question, do some of these players want to leave? And can the Kings go in and have a tough conversation with the veteran and say, look, your role going forward is going to be diminished. And what does that look like? I think, again, we talked about DeMar DeRozan first in the first block here about just the frustrations piling up. And I did, during the post-trade deadline conversation with Scott Perry, I did ask Scott very specifically, hey, look, are you guys going to be players in the buyout market? And by that, I did not mean, are they going to pick up additional players that are being bought out by other teams? It's look, are you going to consider waiving, moving on from some of these veterans in the second half of the season? And he said at this time, that's not the plan. The plan is to play this thing out with this group of players and see how it goes. Now, that can change pretty quickly. Let's just kind of bust into what the players that we're talking about here. DeRozan has a contract next season for $25.7 million. He also has only $10 million of that guaranteed. Now, the Kings could say, hey, we're not going to discuss this with DeRozan at all because we feel like there's a possibility that we could use him as a trade asset moving forward. And it's kind of like what the Golden State Warriors have done with Jonathan Kuminga, where they've just kind of held on to him and said, look, we're not trading you because we think you have value as an asset. And then they went and traded him at the deadline for Kristaps Porzingis in a swap with Buddy Hield. Now, I don't know that that's totally going to be the case when it comes to DeRozan this summer. The Kings could pick up could just pay him, just keep him and keep that $25.7 million. But also it's the $10 million buyout thing, not buyout. It's a $10 million guarantee. That's actually kind of a sticking point. It's one of the reasons why I think why they weren't able to move him at the deadline, but it might be one of the reasons why they can move him going forward. And the thing is that DeRozan's money isn't guaranteed until January 10th. So you could trade DeRozan to a team for another $25 million player or a $20 million player or even a $30 million player and go up in salary or down in salary. That team would then have the option to just buy him out and only pay the $10 million. So there is a certain amount of bargaining chip that goes with the DeRozan contract. But I'd also point out that like between now and March 1st, which is a player has to be waived by March 1st in order to be eligible to sign with another team and play in the playoffs. I do think that there's at least a conversation that could be had here with DeRozan. Again, 25.7 million for next season, but only 10 million guaranteed. What if he dropped that guarantee to 2 million or 4 million? And the Kings can move off of a bunch of money. DeRozan could leave now and potentially go out and sign with a new team this season. And then next season, of course, would take care of itself. He'd already have a little bit of money knowing that he's going to make, 2, 3, 4 million. He'd give up 6 million in that situation, but he'd be able to go shop himself and on the open market and maybe get somewhere around, a mid-level exception. Maybe he couldn't get that. Maybe he'd get, a 2-year, like a biannual exception and get like a 2-year, $10 million deal. Either way, I think that DeMar DeRozan will have a market this summer. And that's because he's still a quality NBA player who's going out there and averaging 18.7 points per game. He's a bucket and he shows up every day and he works hard and he's a good teammate. And so I think DeRozan is one of the options here for the Kings, but they have others. So I think, when we look at Russell Westbrook, he's playing on a minimum deal. So there's not a lot of money to be saved here. The Kings probably wouldn't actually even get a single cent out of that deal. They would just let him go. But does that open the door for Neat Clifford to play at the 1? Maybe Isaiah Stevens on a 2-way contract to come up and play some time and see what he looks like. Would it mean more minutes for Devin Carter? That's a possibility. On top of that, the Kings have Drew Eubanks and Doug McDermott that are also on expiring contracts. So I'm going to take the Zach LaVine deal and kind of put it aside. I don't think there's any way Zach is going to renegotiate the final year of his contract that pays him $49 million. I do think he's going to opt into that contract. The Kings will have a decision to make at some point. If they don't think he's tradable, they could always use his stretch provision, just waive him and pay his contract out over 3 years. So basically it would split that up into like $16 million tranches, $16.5 million tranches over the next 3 years. But I'm also not sure that the Kings want to do that because once you buy out and you stretch provision a player, you can't trade his contract. He might have more value just as an expiring contract for next season. So whether you can trade him or whether you just let him expire, you could clear up money that way. I'd also point out that the Kings used one of their 2 remaining roster spots to sign Dylan Cardwell. And here's the problem. Unless you're going to save money with one of these veterans going out the door, like again, if DeMar DeRozan, you worked it out where maybe he took $2 million less this season to walk away. I don't think that's going to happen. But if you were to do that, then it would open up a little bit of space here for the Kings to go out. And again, if you're opening up roster spots, you have to actually fill those. And the league mandates that you have to have 14 players on your roster. Right now, that's all the Kings have. So if you're going to waive a player, you're going to need to sign somebody. And if you only have $1 million under the luxury tax to spend, that means that, number one, you're getting a rookie scale contract. You're getting something like what Dylan Cardwell signed, which was for $871,000 for the rest of this season. So that's one option. But also, if you can open up a little bit more money, maybe you can go chase a slightly different type of player. Also, the Kings have one 2-way contract that's open because of Dylan Cardwell's elevation to the main roster. There's only 18 games left on that 2-way contract, but I do expect the Kings to use that 2-way contract down the stretch of the season here, whether it's to try someone on a different G League team and sign them to a 2-way, or it's to upgrade one of your own Stockton Kings players to a 2-way contract to reward them for being in your system and all that stuff. So a lot of complicated salary cap stuff here, but to be honest with you, I'm not sure that the Kings are going to be able to get any of these veterans to buy in on a buyout. And if they do, I'm not sure what they can do with that money anyways. So it should be interesting, but I also I don't think that the Kings are, like Scott Perry said, are going to be major players here buying out their own players. All right, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about tanking because the Kings are playing the Utah Jazz and they're really good at tanking. And the Sacramento Kings have not proven to be good at tanking in the past, but it's worth a discussion on what exactly it might look like down the stretch here. The winter games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the winter games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care about the most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The drama of curling matches that starts slow and somehow gets intense fast. Even niche events have become must-see TV while you're locked into the competition. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. With the Winter Games on, there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. All right, we're back. And the Sacramento Kings, they're going to finish the pre-All-Star break schedule Wednesday night in Utah against a Jazz team that is sitting at 17 wins on the season. So they're slightly better than the Kings, but 17-37 is not good. That's not a good basketball team. Again, that's a team that's 20 games under 500. And again, they're going nowhere fast. Now, I think that there is a weird distinction that I would make between what I've seen from the Sacramento Kings and the Utah Jazz, because the Jazz have been doing this for a while. This is a tactic that they have put out there and really embraced over the last handful of years. And at some point, I wonder when the league is going to have conversations about this. We had a game the other night where the Jazz were leading by 17 points and Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr., their newly acquired power forward / center, were killing it. They had a combined 49 points through 3 quarters. Again, the Jazz were up 17 against Orlando. They get to the 4th quarter. The Jazz don't play any of their players. And they go super young, and they give up a 17-point lead, and they lose. That is the clear version of tanking that I think a lot of fans around the league are frustrated by, because if you're sitting there at a game and you're cheering and you paid ticket money to watch, and then you see your team just unwind and pull everybody and say, hey, we're not going to try, it's not a good look, especially in a winnable game. Now, I'm not going to say that the Kings haven't done the same thing. The Kings have gone young. Their injury report for tomorrow night's game, it's almost embarrassing. Actually, it's beyond that. I mean, Russell Westbrook is now out with an ankle injury. He did roll his ankle in the game that we watched on Monday night for sure. So maybe that's legit. Domantas Sabonis has low back soreness. Again, maybe it's legit, maybe it's not. But it's cost Domas I think 4 of the last 5 games. Keegan Murray's still out until after the All-Star break on a grade 2 ankle sprain. He probably could have played a week ago if the playoffs were on the line, but he's not playing right now. We see DeAndre Hunter, who has a legitimate eye injury for sure. Malik Monk is out with an illness. And again, this is an illness that's cost him 5 or 6 games. And this isn't the first time this season that we've seen this, where all of a sudden an illness costs a player an extended period of time. Zach LaVine is out with a pinky tendon injury. We're now it's become a tendon issue, which is interesting because that could cost him weeks. We don't know. We don't really have a distinction when it comes to this. So I'm not going to say that the Kings aren't in the tanking category. Look, this is the worst team in the NBA. They're 12-43. But I also think that this season was over for the Kings well before they started going down this path. And I get what Doug Christie's talking about. And what Scott Perry are talking about, institutionalizing losing. That's not something you want to get in the business of doing. And again, the Kings won 40 games last year, 46 the year before that, 48 the year before that. They're on a downward trajectory which should have told us that they were in for a rough season just because of the way the last 3 seasons have gone. But I don't think anyone thought it would be this bad. I would say the other big difference that I see between a team like the Jazz, who again, last year there was this mystery hip injury for John Collins. It cost him like 30 games. Like, they just keep doing this. But the one huge distinction that I would point to that I think matters for Utah is, number one, they have a roster that they're building very quickly. And so they just made a big trade for Jaren Jackson Jr. They have Lauri Markkanen, who's a star level player, who's averaging, like 26, 27 points per game. On top of that, they've hit it big with Keontae George. And also they have Ace Bailey. So they're super far ahead of the Kings in their build because now they're starting to use their draft capital to add, but they've preserved their 2026 first round pick so they can go out and do some more damage in this year's draft, right? The other distinction I would make is that the Utah Jazz, we're in year 4 of Will Hardy. And Will Hardy so far has a 102 and 198 career record. Last season, the Jazz won 17 games, and they gave Will Hardy a 4-year extension. So the Jazz have picked a lane, and that lane is the Will Hardy, signing. The Will Hardy, they're in the Will Hardy business, and they're sticking with a coach where, as of right now, the Kings, they're not making that distinction with this group. Doug Christie, I don't know whether he deserves to continue coaching the team after this year or not. I don't make those decisions. The team does. But we're looking at a season that is absolutely spun off the rails. If you look at last year's team, I thought Doug Christie did a great job stepping in the last 51 games and finishing 27 and 24. But when the Kings signed him as the new head coach this summer, they gave him a 2-year deal at roughly $2 million per year, according to Sam Amick of The Athletic. And then the 3rd year is a team option with a substantial pay raise. So there's a possibility that Doug Christie gets to keep his job and continue to work as a head coach of the Kings. But the reason I bring this up is you look at the Jazz and the way that guys are starting to develop, guys like, Kyle Filipowski and Keontae George and Ace Bailey. You look at the collection of players, you're starting to see an outline of what this team might look like when they do try to make a run next season or the season after. And it's a smart way to go. Stability, like having a coach that is not just there for year 1, but year 2, year 3, year 4 of your build, that actually matters. So again, I don't know if Doug Christie is going to get that opportunity. We're going to have to wait and see what Scott Perry does here. But I do think that there's pathways here to not only, play the tank game, but also to continue to build your franchise in the right way, to build a culture, to build the pillars that they're talking about. The only way to do that is to actually choose a path and stick with it. So we're going to see probably one of the strangest and worst games ever going into the All-Star break with the Sacramento Kings, basically without 6 or 7 of their rotational players. The only top tier player that will play in this game is DeMar DeRozan. And that's as far as, walking into the season. You look at your top 8-man rotation, there's only one of them standing, and it's DeMar. So it could get ugly. And just a warning, we'll have a podcast tomorrow night. We'll go through all of it after it plays out and, try to see how bad it got for the Kings. But it's very possible that the 14th consecutive loss is coming. And that's just because the Kings aren't in a mode where they're trying to win basketball games. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry if I just completely butchered live reads. If you don't mind, give us a thumbs up, give us a rating and review, subscribe to the channel, all that stuff. We appreciate you making us your first listen of the day here on the Locked On Network. Also, if you never miss an episode, it's time to make it official. Join the Locked On Everydayer Club and get ad-free audio, access to our members-only Discord, and more, all built for our most loyal fans. Click in the description or just go to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayerclub or lockedonkings.supercast.com for more information. Thanks for tuning in. Again, we'll see you tomorrow.